Hello, thank you. Thank you for joining us. It's the first webinar of the new year, so thank you for being here. I hope everybody had a fantastic holiday season and that everybody is ready to get back to work now. So I am Michelle Morris with Consolidated Planning Group. Thank you again for taking the time to be here with us. Thank you, Mike and Mary Ann, for presenting. We've got a fantastic webinar today. We're going to go over things that you need to know as a parent in Texas specifically who is going through divorce with a special needs child. There are some different nuances and different things that you need to think about. And it is always really important to use an expert when you're dealing with this. Not all divorce attorneys are created equally. Not all financial advisors are created equally. Not all mentors and Mary Ann, what would you label yourself?
Divorce coach.
Not all divorce coaches are created equally. So you need to find one who understands about special needs topics. A few housekeeping items before we get going. We are in webinar mode, so we cannot hear you or see you. If you have a question or comment, please put them in the chat box. That's the easiest way for me to read them. I'll be keeping an eye on the chat box and I will let Mike and Mary Ann know when we have questions. Also, since we can't see you or hear you, you might as well enjoy your lunch, sit back with a snack, whatever. We are recording this webinar and we will send a link to the recording and the slides out to you to your email. Whatever email that you registered with. So a couple of things from me before we get going. We are bringing this to you from Consolidated Planning Group. This is kind of our gift to our audience to bring this kind of information. We are financial advisors. We're located just outside of Houston, but we work all across Texas and all across the United States. We've been doing this for 30 years, and the owner of our company has two kids with special needs, and that's why she turned our company to really focus on families who have special needs loved ones. You know, when she was going through all of this with her family and that transition period and the kids growing up, she saw how difficult it was for her and how much noise there is out there and things that aren't really important and how hard it was to find what really is important. And so we decided that we would bring these topics to you to help educate and advocate for families. We do life insurance and investment services. We are members of the Special Needs Planning Academy, and we are nationally certified as Social Security advisors. So when I say special needs financial planning, what I mean is that we help families with protection plans, you know, thinking about life insurance, disability insurance, and income protection. Lifetime care, we help families think about how much is it going to cost once you're gone and you're not here to take care of your loved one anymore, for someone else to step in and take care of them. The numbers can be quite scary. So not only do we help you understand those numbers, but how on earth you could possibly reach those numbers. And we help families find ways to make it happen. We help with transition planning. There are great programs out there. We help you find those and make sure you're signed up for your benefits from the state and the federal government. We handle ABLE accounts, and again, advocacy and education. There are fewer than 0.1% of all the financial advisors across the United States who focus on special needs financial planning. So you are definitely in the right place when you're talking to us at Consolidated Planning Group. I put our contact information in the chat box, and in a little bit, I'll put my personal contact email in there in case you have questions for me. As we go through this, I'm happy to help. One thing that we know keeps you awake at night is thinking about who's going to take care of your child when you're no longer here. So just some quick tips on that topic. First of all, start planning as early as possible. if you haven't started any planning, you're not gonna be in trouble. We're not going to call the principal on you or anything like that, but it's time to get started. No matter what time it is, it's time to get started. Developing these plans in advance will help you feel so much more at ease and have things and be able to make a bigger impact on your financial future overall. Think about what's going to happen after high school. Um, Many kids graduate to the couch, and that's not what you want. That's not what we want. There are great vocational options, residential options, educational options available for your child, children of all abilities. Think about, taking a look at some of those options because there could be waiting lists that you might run up against. And what we always say is just be really careful before you say, oh, Jacob's sister, Sarah, is just going to take care of him when they get older. Well, maybe Jacob likes his sister, Sarah, as his sister and doesn't want Sarah to become mom. He might feel a little bit resentful about that. And maybe Sarah is perfectly willing now to take care of her brother, Jacob. But in the future, Sarah might have her own career, her own dating life, or her own family. And Jacob might be a little bit of a obligation to her, and we don't want that. So think long and hard before you just set it up that way. Okay. So without any more chatter from me, we will go ahead and get started. I see that we've got a great group here with us. Mary Ann is going to start off helping us understand her side of things and how she can help you. And I'm going to make sure that her information is in the chat box as well. So Mary Ann, if you want to go ahead and get started.
Great. Well, thank you so much for having us. I appreciate the opportunity to share about how to proceed when you are facing divorce. It's a scary time. It's something I've been through, and I'm taking the lessons that I've learned through my own personal experience, as well as my professional training, to help you all get through the process, figure out how to navigate, and know that you'll be okay. There is a light at the end of the tunnel. And so if you're in the seminar, you're either facing divorce, know someone who's been through it, or maybe thinking about it in the future, or maybe you've already been divorced. And so a lot of times starting out in this process, where it's just so overwhelming. We don't know where to start. We don't know how we and our kids are going to get through it, what the future is going to look like, how are we going to be able to make sure that our kids get what they need and will thrive during and after the process. It's something that we don't really anticipate happening to us a lot of the time. Sadly, in special needs divorces, the rate can be as high as 80, 85% are some of the numbers I've heard. So even if you're not facing divorce now, know that by having this information, you can be there to help others who may be facing this in their future. There's something called gray divorce, so it affects people of all ages, but there's more of a trend these days for people who are older, in their 50s and older, to get through to be facing divorce. And so know that these tips that I'm going to share with you are going to help you no matter if you're young children or adult children, or if you yourself are young or older. Either way, we go through the similar emotions and process, and I want to help share some tips for you to get through this so that you can have a successful divorce and life after divorce. And so I am a mom of 2 boys on the spectrum, and I was married for 21 years before I learned I was getting divorced. It wasn't something I had on my radar or expected, and it was kind of a shock. And so trying to figure out how to proceed and how to get through the process was difficult. But I did know one thing. I did know that I was going to make sure that through this process, I would do everything I could to make sure my kids would be taken care of. And that's the approach I took, even though definitely, we go through a lot of emotions, but we want to focus our efforts, especially when we have special needs children, to make sure that we're looking at their needs as part of the process and acting in such a way that gives everyone the best result, so that during the divorce and afterwards, we've got the best relationships we can with our kids, with our exes, and all those people who are important to us. And so it took so much time, money, and effort trying to figure out how to get through the process, what I needed to do, who I needed to work with. And it was kind of crazy that people should have to recreate the wheel every time this happened. And especially with the divorce rates I mentioned, I figured there's got to be a better way to share this information. And so I decided to make it my mission to help other people get through the overwhelm and complexities of special needs divorce. And so I formed a company for the first time. I've got a business background, but I had been a 20-year stay-at-home mom. But this was so important to me that I decided to start special family transitions to help families going through divorce. And went through a lot of training. So not just my own personal experience, but went through a lot of training courses and learned about divorce and all the hands-on experience. And I'm proud to say that I just this past year got certified as a special needs divorce coach. So I've been a divorce coach for a while, certified divorce coach, which is a pretty intense program in itself. But now there's a special certification that only a few of us have right now, which I'm proud to say that I'm helped develop and actually will be one of the instructors for that program.
Wow.
So
Congratulations on that, Mary Ann.
Congratulations,
thank
Mary
you.
Ann.
Yeah, so I'm excited about that. And so another thing I've done as well is this past year is taking some mediation courses. So I want to bring in lots of different skills and lots of different perspectives to my clients and those who need help, whether it's through divorce, whether it's kind of thinking through different options for their family, how families can work together to hopefully come to an agreement. So whether you're working with an attorney or not, before or after, these are some things that we can work on together to figure out, what is it, what do we want life to look like? What do we want, what's important for us and what's important for us to plan for our kids? So yeah, I'm happy to help out in all kinds of ways. Before, during, and after divorce as well. I even had a conversation yesterday with one of my divorce clients who wants to kind of work on her schedule post-divorce, what it's going to look like in terms of making things work for her family in her home. So there's so many things that are affected in terms of our daily life, our schedules, how it impacts the kids. And so know that I'm here for you. There's resources to help you transition and to help your kids transition as well. And so one thing I did as well for people who maybe can't work with a coach or just kind of want to get some basic information is I put together a course. It says divorce for moms, but really it's really for anybody in terms of kind of what you need to know to get started. And even if you're in the process, things that you need to be thinking about to discuss with your lawyers, with your team, so that you're kind of thinking big, longer term and big picture, and that you have the confidence then to go forward and advocate for your family. And so the way I put this course together, I called it RISE. I developed a framework. I thought about it. It's like, what was important to me in my divorce, and what's going to help other people be successful in their divorce. And I broke it down to different steps with an acronym I developed called RISE. And I'll go through each one of these different aspects of what you need to do and think about so that you can have a successful divorce for you, for your kids, and for your future. And so there's a link there, and when you get the slides, you're welcome to click on that, and it'll take you to the course if you find out more information, or just always reach out to me. Happy to help out. And so you'll notice a graphic I have on the right. It's something that you may or may not be familiar with. It's called the grief cycle. And the point of me putting it on here is to let you know that we go through so many emotions and so many stages in any kind of loss or change. And definitely divorce is a big change for us, for our kids, and they're going through this as well. And so when we go through these phases, know that it's normal. It's something that we're going to go through. Sometimes people stay in one phase longer than others, and sometimes we may go back to certain phases. But the point is, when we finally get to the point of acceptance that this is what we're facing, is when we can make good, rational decisions. A lot of people make the mistake of maybe making decisions in anger or when they're full of emotion. And my job and one of my roles is to help you get past emotion and think about divorce as a business and financial transaction. So granted, it affects a lot of things, there's emotion involved, but when we make decisions for our future, we want to make sure that they're the best decisions we can make, something that we're not going to regret later, and that will hopefully not end up costing us a lot of money in the process. So we want to get in the right mindset, understand where we are, know that we do have the ability to make good decisions. And like I said, look at it in terms of the long term. This is your one shot to get it right. You want to have goals for a divorce and come at this in a way as you would a business deal, perhaps. It sounds a little bit cold sometimes to think about divorce and the splitting of the family and everything related to that as a business decision. But it's a finite process that we have to go through. We want to bring in professionals that are there to help us. But at the end of the day, we want to do what's best for us and our family. Granted, there'll be some negotiations and you may not get everything you want, but we want to do the best that we can and have a driving vision for what that's going to look like.
Mary Ann, I have a question. When you say get into the right mindset, how do you help people get into that mindset?
Yeah, so part of it is looking at the goals. What's important to us? Is it, I just want to hurt the other person? Do I want to get revenge? Or do I want to do what's best for me and my kids? And so I have them think about what's important to them. What is it that we really want? End of the day, I mean, yeah, it may be hurtful. It may be something that well, not to say that moms don't, fall for divorce first, but sometimes, you may be the person initiating it, or you may be the recipient of that, whether it's expected or not, or maybe it's a mutual decision. And so we want to go in there knowing that we have the skills, and sometimes people are afraid. A lot of people, maybe if you're, for example, the stay-at-home mom, as I was, we're wondering, well, how am I going to survive? How are my kids going to survive? And so we have to know, working with a lawyer will help us, understand the laws of what we're, entitled to, but knowing that we're strong and we can get through this. Sometimes people want to just be done and just accept anything, right? I'm not saying that we have to fight, but really stand in your ground for what you believe in and what you can mutually agree upon, and know that you have the strength. If you don't have the strength, I'll help you get that strength. But know that that it's up to you to stand up for you and your kids, because your kids need you at this time to represent them, right? Whether you're the mom or the dad, you're there not just divorcing the mom or the dad, but really, how's that going to impact the kids, and what do we need to do to think about it in those terms. And so an important part of that a lot of people have conflict about is the costs, I guess, frankly. And so we want to figure out, what we need. What are our child's current needs? What's our current budget? What money is coming in? What money needs to go out? And not just now, but in the future, especially when you have a divorce with a special needs child, you've got to think about long term. It's not just today what the needs are, but in the future, as Michelle talked about, there's all kinds of planning issues. And so by working with a financial person, you can kind of get a better handle on that, but try to take a look at, what are you currently spending? What are your current needs? And what money do you have to pay for that? That way you can try to figure out with the other parties, if, one of them is the moneyed spouse, as they say, or even if you're both working, how are you going to work together to pay for those needs? And that's kind of what a lot of the decisions in divorce come down to. And so you want to look at what does your child do? Do they do therapy? Do they have special, diet that they need to look at? What are the schools that they're going to go to? Are you going to need vocational programs? And these things, especially if your child is young, it's hard to think about those things right now. But just, professionals and others, and research you can do to see, okay, what are the things that are on the horizon that I need to start planning for? And so you want to start thinking about those, investigating. For instance, when I went through divorce, my kids were older, so I had to start visiting different programs. And Michelle mentioned different post-high school programs. And so you want to see what those are like and get costs for those to see, okay, well, these are things that my child may need. And if that's the case, then how are we going to come to an agreement to be able to fund that? So that's a big part. And then you also want to look at taking care of yourself. A lot of times, as a parent of a child with a disability, we focus all our energy on our kids, right? Which is important. But if we're not taking care of ourselves, we're not being the best parent we can be, either whether it's divorce or not, but we want to be there and be in a good position, mental space to make good decisions, especially during divorce. There's so much stress that you want to take care of yourself. I can tell you how to do that all right now, but the better care by doing self-care, even though that was a foreign term to me, years ago when I was raising my kids. But I learned it during my divorce. Is figure, okay, what I did in the past wasn't working for me. So that's why I started taking better care of myself, and then thinking more clearly and be able to make better choices and approaches in my divorce. And you can't do this alone. So seek out professionals, family, friends that have been through it, that can be supportive, whether it's for advice or just someone that you can talk to. And then when you do look for professionals, you want to secure your team, is you want to find people who understand. As Michelle mentioned, not everybody understands all the special needs aspects. I know when I was looking for people to help my kids in terms of therapists, they were hard to find, people that had experience or were even willing to work with kids with disabilities. So try to find people who understand what you're going through, who can support you, understand the legal aspects, the financial, mental health, and even as I mentioned, there's very few divorce coaches who understand special needs. Those of us who do focus on special needs divorce have been through it ourselves. That's why we get into it, because we know how hard it is, and we want people to avoid some of the pitfalls and mistakes that we made and help them get through the process in a faster, more efficient, and more cost-efficient manner as well. So yeah, well, it's your way. You can't do it alone. You can, but it'll take you more time and energy. And so sometimes bringing somebody who's been through it can kind of give you some insights that you may not have thought of on your own.
I think it's kind of like I said before, clearing out the clutter and the useless information that's floating up around there. And, all these things that people say, you need kind of an expert to help you navigate what you really, really need to focus on, what's the most important. And then also you're talking about support groups. I know that these days there's so many great support groups like on Facebook, and you can just be a part of those and find some truly great help.
Yeah, on that topic, so there are some things out there, and there's some ones in person that we can attend. I know in the past in this seminar, Allison's mentioned about divorce care. So that's something that is not especially specific, but if you want to just kind of get some information about how to get through divorce in general, they're there as a helpful resource, and there's other ones I can share as well. And I'm thinking about how I can help in that respect too. So contact me if you're interested, but I want to do some kind of support group as well. So yeah, I'll definitely share information when that comes available. And so going through divorce is hard enough, but when you have a special needs child, there's other considerations you want to consider and plan for. So kids, for instance, kids with autism have a hard time with change and with changes in routine. And so I'm happy to share some tips about how to help you and your family adjust to that. Planning ahead of time is the best way for that. We don't want anyone to be taken by surprise, whether it's the spouse or the kids. So there's ways to prepare. I have on my YouTube channel a video about creating a social story. And so that's a great way to kind of introduce kids to what's going to be happening, the changes in their life, because they want to know that, where are they going to be living, right? What is a day going to look like, and what the schedule going to look like? So we want to think through all those things to make things as predictable as we can for our kids, and know that both parents hopefully are there to support them during those changes and afterwards too. It's hard enough for kids sometimes to travel from house to house. We want to have a good way to ease them into that and be supportive and loving during that process when that does happen. And for a lot of divorces, it's just divorce and we're done. Well, here we've got a plan for not just now, but we may have a child who may need care in the future and forever. And so we have to think about that as well as we're thinking about our divorce and how to handle things and make agreements.
I just want to interject right here, because your slide, Marianne, mentions the trust, it's imperative to get an experienced estate planning attorney who knows how to draft a proper special needs trust. That is a very specialized practice. It's sort of a subnet, or it is a sub niche. And you don't want to rely on your divorce attorney to help you draft that trust. They can provide some guidance as to in terms of what it looks like in the family court judgment, but that really is a completely different domain. And if you have a lawyer who's telling you they can do both, your antenna should be up on that for sure.
Yeah,
I
that's
just
for
wanted
sure.
to-
Yeah, one thing I learned in my process is that I need all kinds of experts, right?
Right.
And so, yeah, try to find ones, as I mentioned, the certain ones that understand what it takes, because we don't want to, and Michael will talk more about this, but word things in such a way or avoid the right wording. And that way, kids may lose eligibility for benefits and other things, and child support has to be paid a certain way, especially if they're over 18. So, yeah, we want people who are experts for family law and estate planning as well, for sure. And so, yeah, there's different ways to fund those needs that we talked about. It could be child support. It could be how the assets are divided. It could be spousal support, which is a little harder in Texas to get. Life insurance programs, and all kinds of creative ways that we can work together and figure out how those things will happen. And that's what financial planner definitely plays a big role in that as well. And all people don't know that in Texas, child support for a child with a disability or adult child with a disability can be lifelong or indefinite. So by having that information and coming to agreements, that is key. And every state is different in cases of people from different states watching. But either way, no matter where you're located, you can always come up to any kind of agreement in mediation or on your own. It doesn't have to be what the court decides or those laws in those states. So definitely you have the ability to make, to support your child with a joint agreement, as you both may agree to. And so we talked a lot about the technical things, but a lot of it is how you portray and how you carry yourself throughout this process and afterwards. And so I found to get the best result now and in the future, you want to come across in a confident, professional manner. We don't want to be someone who's, yelling and hysterical when you go into your lawyer's office or working or trying to communicate with your soon-to-be ex-spouse, right? So there's a framework by a gentleman named Bill Eddy, in the High Conflict Institute. And his format is brief, informative, friendly, and firm. He calls it BIF. He's got a series of books about this, about how we can effectively communicate with people who may be higher conflict personalities. But this works for really any kind of situation. So we want to, whether it's on our own communications or if we need to use a parenting app, there's ways to make sure that we're keeping our communications as professional as we can. And then sometimes divorce itself may just seem overwhelming. How am I going to get through this? So we want to make a plan and just take one step at a time, and people can help you to meet your goals. So you may get homework from your attorney because there's certain deadlines and things that have to be met. And so I'm happy to help you go through the documents, help you kind of think about different things that may be helpful in your parenting plans, all different aspects. So just take one step at a time and know that you will get through it. And when you are done, I know there's life beyond divorce. It seems like it may take forever. It's just so maybe all consuming, but know that the decisions we make now will help us in the future. And whatever result you do get in divorce, your life afterwards is what you make it. So I'm trying to share a positive approach to divorce. I had to reinvent myself, and I did after divorce. It wasn't something that I planned for, but I've made the best of my situation, kind of taking lemons and turning into lemonade. So know that you do have a bright future. It may not be what you anticipated starting out in your relationship, but it does get better for you and for your kids. And look at it as a new beginning and so many opportunities and new things that maybe you wouldn't have done before on your own.
That's a great way to look at it, Mary Ann. We do have one question in the chat box. She's asking, you mentioned that child support might need to be paid a certain way. So I want to go ahead and talk about that for a second. If child support is going to continue beyond the age of 18, and you have a special needs kiddo who could be collecting federal or state benefits like SSI or Medicaid, things like that specifically, there are income limits and there are asset limits. And if your child is getting child support beyond age 18, that will be considered as income for your child. So they would be cut off from those SSI benefits if they have too much income. So one way to prevent the child support from affecting their SSI benefits or other state and federal benefits is to have that redirected, that child support payment redirected to a first party special needs trust. Do either of you want to talk about a little bit about how that works and what that looks like in reality?
Sure, I can address that. So you have to have a Medicaid payback trust, and that's where you get the estate planning lawyer involved, because that's probably the most important type of trust that they prepare. And once you have that trust drafted, then the family court order needs to obligate the child support payments to go into that trust. Now, one of the wrinkles is that you cannot go through the attorney general and have those payments go through the trust. So you're going to have to opt out of that system. And a sort of a pro tip is go ahead and have the trust drafted. I've seen issues come up where people didn't think about that on the front end, and then parents they would argue about how does the trust need to read and that sort of thing. And this is really for when kids are 18, right? And the other thing is that know that when you go through this process, and Mary Ann touched upon this a little bit, but you really want to take the high road, because you never know, like if you're going to have to get a guardianship, for example, that's a lot of court intervention in your life. And so you're kind of always going to need to be on your best behavior, so to speak. And that can be draining. And going back to what Mary Ann said about the mindset, is that you, you have to develop a different type of resilience, and it's hard. And the best way to do it is to be intentional, and that if you can attend to that, then if you have competent professionals assisting you, then a lot of it can take care of itself, right? But if you are in a situation where there's a lot more conflict, then that actually makes it even more important to have someone who can, address how the courts should resolve these issues. Because sometimes, it's not often, it's about 10% of the time cases go to trial. But I've seen good lawyers mess things up because they don't handle these cases all that often. A lot of family law attorneys will go through and handle maybe one or two of these cases in their whole career. And there are just a lot of nuances that exist in the space that don't necessarily exist in other divorces. And I hope that answers the question. If it doesn't,
Yes, I think
please let me
so.
know.
So Mike, do you do special needs trusts?
No.
No, but you
No. So
refer
I
your
refer
clients
them
out.
out. There are a handful of lawyers in Houston that I trust. There are lawyers in other parts of the state who I trust as well. Happy to provide referrals for that. In particular, if you already have a family law attorney that you're comfortable with, great. The most important thing is to make sure that the trust is properly drafted, because that's really essential.
Yeah, we have a list of attorneys also that focus on special needs topics. There's just a couple more questions. Mary Ann, I'm going to leave this slide up while we talk so that people can be sure to grab all of your contact info. Do you have anything else that you want to say about these slides?
Yeah, I just want to mention, yeah, I appreciate that. So I have plenty of resources. I've written some articles for magazines, all kinds of things that I'm doing. So most of it is going to be on my professional Facebook page and personal as well. You're welcome to connect with me there. But the best way to do that is on my Special Flame Transitions Facebook. I've got the QR code, and feel free to email me if you want a complimentary consultation. I know we've talked about so many different people as part of the team, and you're thinking, I don't have time or money to deal with all these, work with all these people. But by working with a professional, we can help you save money by spending less time and less energy on things that can be done more efficiently. So yeah, I'm here to help this make a better process for you. And yeah, I've also got on the right as a private Facebook group if you're interested in joining that as well. So yeah, happy to support you. And there's this team here today is definitely very well versed in all the things that need to happen.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. So I did mention we have a couple of questions coming up in the chat box, and then I'll turn everything over to Mike. First question, what if the custodial parent is paying child support to the non-custodial parent? What would happen when that child turns 18?
You, from a eligibility standpoint, you would still need the child support to go into a trust. If the money is going to the non-custodial parent, I think you have to really look at why that is, because the child support statute is designed for the best interest of the child, right? So how much time is the non-custodial parent really spending with the child, right? Because technically the court retains jurisdiction over the possession schedule after the child turns 18, if it's a child with special needs. They've been adjudicated as an adult disabled child. And so you have two different parts of the child support statute that you read together. And it really, I'll give you a lawyer answer, but it just kind of depends on the facts of the case, because,
Yeah, every story is different. And
right.
then you have different answers to meet those different stories. So you said that if they didn't have it set up from the beginning for the child support to be directed to the first party trust, they can't just call the Attorney General's office. They have to.
No, they can't. And they actually need a court order that directs that the monies go to the special needs trust, and it can't go through the state disbursement unit, and the Attorney General can't, quote unquote, provide services, because by statute it becomes what's called a Title IV case in the Family Code. And if it's a Title IV case, then you can't have the money go to a trust. And I had this come up recently where someone had a prior court order and it needed to be changed for that reason. And we had to figure out a way to get the Attorney General no longer involved in the case.
And I've seen also where even the child under 18, it can go to start going into the first party trust effective, the date of the divorce. So yeah, no, that doesn't have to be only when they're over 18. It can be when they're younger as well.
Right. I mean, the one issue there is you got to make sure. I mean, again, it all depends, but I mean, the underlying consideration is, are you going to get that adult disabled child finding, right? Because you need that finding in order to get the child support beyond 18. And so sometimes what will happen is parents will not agree that the child is disabled, right? And there's a slide, and we can go into that in a little bit, but that's one of the practical considerations. So let's talk a little bit about how a child's disability impacts a divorce. It can impact a divorce in a lot of different ways. It can impact the way the percentages or the manner in which the property is divided in the community property estate. it can impact the amount of child support. We spent a lot of time talking about a child support going into a special type of trust, but it could also impact the amount of child support, right? And that will hinge on a couple of different things, but at the end of the day, what's most important is the needs of the child. That's really what the court is most concerned about, and that's what parents should be most concerned about. And Mary Ann spoke earlier about being in the right mindset to put your kids first, and everybody says they put their kids first, right? But sometimes emotion impacts cognition, right? And cortisol brain is for real, and each case is different, but in each the underlying emotions are different in each case. I mean, sometimes it's variations of a theme, but at the end of the day, people are unique, their situations are unique. And so you really got to have a clear way to put your kids first. And so it's not just the amount of child support, it's not whether or not it goes into a trust or not, whether or not a child is a child with special needs impacts the decision making regarding the child, right? And when the child is older, sometimes you have an interplay between what happens in the guardianship court and what happens in the family court, and that can get complicated. You have a potential for something called spousal maintenance. Texas does not have alimony, but it does have this thing. So it's not like California or New York, but it does have this thing called spousal maintenance. And if you are taking care of a child with special needs who would meet the standard of being an adult disabled child, then you could potentially get spousal maintenance. Now, a lot of lawyers will tell you that if you're getting an estate and the low to mid six figures, you're not going to qualify for Chapter 8 spousal maintenance. And that's not entirely true, right? There's a case that came out last year or so where someone got $750,000 and they still qualified for Chapter 8 spousal maintenance. And so, these issues, they can impact a lot of different things. And so it's just important to know that going in. If we go to the next slide, please. So what is an adult disabled child, right? Because we keep throwing this term around, but let's really break down how the Texas Family Code defines it. And it's the child, whether institutionalized or not, requires substantial care and personal supervision because of a mental or physical disability and will not be capable of self-support. And the disability exists, or the cause of the disability is known to exist on or before the 18th birthday of the child. Now, does that mean you have to go out and get a finding before the child turns 18? Maybe not, but sometimes it might be harder, right? Because the court, you don't want a court to be tasked with looking backwards in time, right? But again, this is one of those situations where there's just so much variety. But that's what you need for an adult disabled child finding under the Texas Family Code. And so what if it's too soon to tell, right? Well, you can still, the child's needs can still impact everything but the payment of child support beyond the age of 18 and beyond the possession and access schedule when the child turns 18. So the amount of child support, now you don't necessarily need the child support going into a trust at that point in time if there are eligibility benefits, but the possession and access schedule, rights and duties in terms of making decisions for the child. And this could be really important in terms of medical care, right? Because sometimes parents will not agree on medical care. And that's important, right? One parent could be either they're genuine and they're just kind of in denial about certain realities. And sometimes it's just self-serving, right? I mean, the guy, I say guy, most times guy, not always, but most of the time, they just don't want to pay more in child support. And so they use that as an out. They say, well, I don't know. I don't think our child is really as challenged as moms say, right? And and then that gets into some real interesting nuances in terms of what you're able to put forth in terms of evidence. And but that again, all facts, each case is different. So if we go to the next slide, please, Michelle. How is the amount of child support determined? So this goes back to two things. One, you look at the part of the statute that addresses all children, right? And so what happens in that part of the statute is you look to see if the parents are making above guideline child support. Because if it's above guideline child support, then you have to prove what's called the proven needs of the child and work backwards from that, right? And the court sort of allocates between the two parents to figure out how you get to meet the proven needs. If the parents don't make above the cap, which is roughly, it varies a little bit if you're self-employed or not, but basically it comes out to around $12,000 a month after taxes. You look to all these different factors, right? And there are over a dozen of them. But at the end of the day, it's still kind of the same thing. You're looking at the needs of the child. And if there's one thing that you can take away from this part of the presentation, is that child support is not about lifestyle. It is about the needs of the child. And so let's talk about the part of the child support statute that addresses factors that are unique to a child that has special needs who's going to qualify as an adult disabled child. And probably the most important thing is that it looks at the future needs of the child, right? And then that can get complicated because parents are in disagreement about what the medical needs of the child, or one parent's going to say, well, I'm just going to have my sister take care of the child. I don't think the child needs to be in a home. And that may or may not be realistic. That may or may not be in the child's best interest. The other factor that the court will really look at is who's actually providing the supervision for the child, right? And so I almost draw an analogy to a life care plan in a personal injury case, where you're kind of looking at the cost of care into the future and working backwards from that. And to a certain extent, especially when parties are in agreement about the needs of the child, right? Because not everything is contentious, not everything is high conflict. Sometimes parents can't agree about what the needs of the child are. It does really become estate planning by other means, right? To borrow the line from Bismarck. And so maybe it was Clausewitz, I can't remember. But so the idea is that, especially if you're going to get into a situation where you have blended families, this becomes potentially problematic. And to the extent that one parent is feeling guilty about the divorce, well, that might be the time to try to seek an agreement, to be quite honest, to kind of head that off, at the pass, which goes back to the idea of having a competent estate planning lawyer involved, right? Because, the other thing is you might want to have different types of trusts involved. You might have to have a Medicaid payback trust for the child support, but for other things, you can put that in a trust where the money doesn't immediately go back to the federal government once the child passes. And so if we go to the next slide, Michelle. So this is something that's really interesting, right? Is that the court can still weigh in on possession and access. And that's something that makes this really different from cases in which you do not have an adult disabled child. And people can still disagree about who needs to see the child when and that sort of thing. And in addition to that, you have the potential for concurrent jurisdiction with probate courts or with the court that's going to hear a guardianship. And so all cases are different. But at the end of the day, there's another takeaway from this is that there are nuances here that don't manifest themselves in cases that don't necessarily involve children with special needs, in particular when the children will qualify as an adult disabled child under the Texas Family Code. Okay, if we go to the next slide, please, Michelle. Thank you. So let's talk about the amount of support determined for spousal maintenance. All right. So this is about providing the spouse who's taking care of the child their minimum reasonable needs. Again, it's not about lifestyle. All right. That's one of the things that's really different in Texas from some other populous states like New York or California. And so, um, if the parent is taking care of the child, um, and that prevents that parent from earning sufficient income to provide for the spouse's minimum reasonable needs, then you are looking at spousal maintenance, and you are looking at spousal maintenance for as long as the spouse is caring for the disabled child. All right. And for someone who is angry, right? Or someone, and I'll talk a little bit about narcissism because I feel like that is definitely on the rise in our society. You will have people who are narcissistic who just want to discard the other person, doesn't meet their needs anymore, so they're just done with that person. Okay? Well, in that sort of situation, you may be, if you're the one taking care of the child, you may be at a it's not like you're just going to walk away, right? You're not going to walk away from your child with special needs, and it's frankly not right. And to allow the narcissist, in particular if the narcissist is earning a good living, right, that could provide you support, it's not right to allow that narcissist to walk away. And sometimes people will do that because they're just sick of the conflict. And what I always tell people is that they need to go through this process in the healthiest way possible. And one of there are a couple of things that come to mind. Take the high road. There's less traffic, right? In fact, there's a great song that I encourage a lot of my clients to listen to called "The High Road" by a band called Broken Bells, and it kind of alludes these types of conflicts. And so I would, if you're if you're if this sort of situation is a potential reality for you, I would encourage you to mentally and emotionally prepare yourself to be resilient in a way that maybe you haven't had to be before, right? The other thing that I'll say is that be nice about everything but the money. Because a lot of this stuff, once you've got a resolution of the case, in particular, if it's a mediated settlement agreement, which is about roughly how 90% of cases resolve themselves, they resolve themselves in mediation. There are no backsies. There's no one there. It's almost impossible to undo. I mean, almost impossible. I mean, so let's talk about if parents are disagree about whether or not a disability exists. What do you do? Well, you'll go to the trier of fact. You'll go to a judge, and you'll have to present evidence, right? And so then the question is, well, who provides that evidence? Well, a parent can provide that evidence, but sometimes you might need testimony from experts. And it's kind of beyond the scope of this presentation, but just know that the role of social science or soft science experts in Texas courts is extraordinarily nuanced. It really, really is. And there were some cases that did not involve special needs, but children with special needs that came out last year, or one of them came out earlier this year, actually. And it really was a game changer for how people are supposed to do experts. And so now the legislature has changed the law effective September 1 for cases filed after September 1. All right. But this particular law, when you go back to the way that it was initially enacted in I want to say 15, it's a mess. It's a mess. And I can assure you, I mean, there are a lot of board certified family law attorneys that have not probably spent enough time understanding the nuances of the family code provision that I'm speaking about. It's really kind of extraordinary. Let's go to the next slide, please. Okay, so there's this thing called the Texas Family Law Practice Manual. And if you get a divorce in the state of Texas, and if you signed a mediated settlement agreement, I'd wager to say 99% of the time, if you mediated with a good mediator, it's going to have some sort of language that alludes to this practice manual. And it is the Bible for how family law attorneys in Texas are supposed to draft family court judgments. Because another sort of unique thing about Texas family law is that our orders are voluminous. You go to a lot of states, a divorce decree could be 5 pages. You have children in Texas, in particular, adult disabled children, that is going to be a very, very long court order. It's not unheard of to have a divorce decree that's 40, 50 pages long, right? And so people will sometimes go to mediation and hash out effectively a back of the envelope type deal, right? And then it comes down to the nitty gritty about, well, how are we really going to draft this, right? And lawyers, it's not uncommon at all for lawyers to disagree about how things get drafted, right? And then the mediator, under most mediated settlement agreements, those, at least in Houston, will serve as the arbitrator. The mediator will actually serve as a judge to figure out what language could be used, right? And once the mediator serving as arbitrator has made that decision, stuff involving children, as long as the court has jurisdiction, you can always revisit those issues. But just because you can revisit kid-related issues doesn't mean that it's easy or cost-effective to do so. And so let me give you a concrete example of what we're talking about here. You'll know what I'm talking about. A lot of times a court order will say you're supposed to use a preferred provider. All right. So that's somebody that accepts your insurance. Well, sometimes you might have a specialist providing care that is not accepting insurance. That is not a preferred provider. And so you want to have carve outs for certain providers or for certain practice needs, right? And even in cases with children that don't involve children with special needs, you have a court-appointed therapist, for example, for the kids. Well, a lot of therapists, a lot of psychologists, therapeutic psychologists, they don't accept insurance, period, right? And so you're obligated to use a preferred provider, but everyone knows that a certain therapist is seeing the child. And you don't want to be in a situation where one parent doesn't like the influence of the therapist that has the relationship with the child, right? So how do you address that from a drafting perspective? Well, you have a carve out. So-and-so psychologist is accepted from this requirement, right? I'll give you another example where the family law practice manual can be potentially problematic, and that is in the definition of medical expenses. A certain hot button issue is that some parents feel that their children do better on special diets, right? But then you'll have a disagreement about whether or not there should be additional monies paid or reimbursements made for that diet or that therapy, right? And then you go back to tiebreaker language. I mean, I don't mean to get into the weeds on this, but just know, I mean, if basically what I'm looking at this is if I'm a parent with a child with special needs and I'm going through a Texas family law matter, what are the sorts of questions that I need to have on my list when I'm interviewing lawyers, when I'm talking to my current lawyer, if I'm representing myself, whatever the case may be, right? These are the sorts of questions that need to be on everyone's radar. Michelle, if we go to the next slide, please.
Yes, perfect.
That's it. So
That's it. That's all you have.
Yeah. So a little bit about myself. I'm a board certified family law attorney. My office is in 2 Houston Center. That is my cell phone number. Most lawyers do not give out their cell phone numbers, but I give out my cell phone number to clients and to potential clients. I can't talk to anybody until a conflict check has been run by my firm. I work with some wonderful lawyers named Jeff Diamond and Kelsey Yalbert. We bring kind of an interdisciplinary approach. We've done a lot of civil litigation, but we do a lot of complicated family law litigation. I'll brag on Jeff a little bit. He got earlier, I guess it was February last year. He probably set a state record in Texas for a jury verdict on a breach of a divorce settlement agreement. A very complicated 3-week jury trial, and they got the ultimate judgment was about $60 million, but the jury's verdict was like $157 million. So we're not afraid of complicated work.
Mike, do you practice in Brazoria County?
Yes.
Okay. I just have a couple more slides, and I'm going to show you, you're going to receive all these slides later on today. This is some other issues that you might want to keep on your radar that we can help you with. But what you really need to know is if you're going through a divorce right now, one place where we could really come in handy is by running the future care cost estimate. So you can walk into the courtroom or into mediation understanding the numbers a little bit better, not just winging it, oh, we think it's going to cost this. We can really give you a good estimate on those numbers. Another thing that we recommend is that each parent pays for and has life insurance that will be paid into the child's third-party special needs trust. And that's something that can be put into the divorce decree, right, Mike?
I'm sorry, say that again, Michelle.
Each parent having life insurance that pays to the child's trust.
Yes, that's a good idea. Yeah, absolutely.
This is our team. We're located just outside of Houston in Sugar Land, but we do serve families again across the United States, all across Texas. We are an independent financial firm. We're not tied to just one larger company. We can work with all kinds of different companies. We will be reaching out to you. Let me go back. You see all these smiling faces? Don't be rude when we call you to see if you want to schedule your free consultation. We are just trying to find out if you have more questions. We want to help answer those questions. Our consultation is over Zoom. It usually takes between 30 to 45 minutes, depending on your needs. We're going to answer as many questions as we can for you, learn about you and your family, and then tell you how we think we could help you and what our costs are and how the process works. This page also has the links to our other social media. And Mike, do you only represent clients in the Houston area or also other areas in Texas? And do you accept Texas legal?
I'm not sure what Texas legal
Like
is.
Texas legal aid. It's a low-cost legal aid service. Are you part of that?
No, I'm not. And we do have a statewide practice. So yeah, we do take cases outside of Houston.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, again, I want to thank all of you for being here with us today. I hope you've enjoyed. This is just the first of many, many, many webinars to come this year. We are here for you. If you have topics you would like to see us discuss, you can email. If you have kind words that you would like to share with us, we would love your testimonials regarding helpfulness of our webinars, or if you've worked with us. If you have further questions for Mike, the attorney, or Mary Ann, the divorce coach, please reach out to them directly. And if you have questions that pertain to the financial side of things, that would be Consolidated Planning Group. So again, we thank you so much, and have a great day. And yeah.
I just want to say thank you to Michelle and Allison and to Mary Ann. I really enjoy these presentations, and I'm very appreciative of the work that y'all do in the community.
Thank you so much. And if you have questions that we didn't get to, just reach out to us and we'll answer those right away for you. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Have a great day, and thank you for the great information, Mike and Marianne. Bye-bye.